You're listening to Media Tackle, tackling big ideas through analysing media and pop culture with Craig Norris, PhD. All right. Hi, everyone. This is Media Tackle for another week. I'm your host, Craig Norris, joined again by Trent Breward. Breward? Welcome.
Yes. There's been a few different pronunciations of my name, but that one works.
So today we're doing a discussion of Zack Snyder's cut of Justice League, and I guess a brief introduction to who I am in relation to that. I'm a comic book fan. I've always read comics and probably read more Marvel comics than DC, but certainly was grabbing some DC stuff through teenage to 20s and then getting back into it maybe in the 30s, going through that whole resurgence phase with Alan Moore's work and the Dark Knight Returns. And then, of course, very much enjoying the Tim Burton stuff. Then you've got Chris Nolan's. And this film, though, really is, I think, a product of the contemporary superhero universe of Marvel, right? And a reaction to that Marvel space. And I think it's pretty well established, the history around that in terms of the Warner Brothers and the DC publisher realizing that why aren't they milking this property for more if we wanted to take a corporate approach? And after the success of Iron Man and Marvel, DC wanting to push out more content, and rather than Chris Nolan picking up the baton, going from the Dark Knight trilogy, from what I can recall, Chris Nolan recommending Zack Snyder to take up the DCEU, the DC Comic Expanded Universe, with firstly Man of Steel, which, of course, did an origin story of Superman, was it was well enough received in terms of what I recall the box office figures being strong enough. Not Marvel or Star Wars level strong enough, but strong. Strong enough that they, from what I can recall, they kind of truncated the next move, which was rather than a standalone second Superman or Batman or other superhero character, they went straight into Batman v Superman, which had an even more fraught response. And the sense there was that, from what I can recall, there was a lot of discussion around a tone that was a bit too dark. And hesitation around Warner Brothers around the direction that was going in. And I guess the reason why I'm providing this background is to really set up why we now have two versions of the Justice League film. We have the theatrical release, which came out by Zack Snyder ostensibly, but Joss Whedon being brought in at the end when Zack Snyder stepped out for family tragedy reasons. And Joss Whedon came in to basically, it seemed at first to simply wrap it up, right? That what I can recall, a lot of the briefing notes or the press releases coming out of Warner Brothers was, Zack Snyder's moving on for family reasons, and everything's there kind of, and Joss Whedon's just gonna do some final shoots and get it all done. What we know, though, behind the scenes, after that film was released and quite poorly received, and many people considered it quite poor, and I think on Rotten Tomatoes it has a pretty dismal rating. The reaction to that was, this isn't the version of the film. Well, there's another film here, right? That people were pointing out that this really seems to be a film that isn't meshed. That you've got Zack Snyder's film and you've got Joss Whedon's film, and they're not really talking to each other, and the whole thing is kind of like what's going on with characters here? What are their motivations? Truncated, and then more and more rumors started to emerge around really radical and expensive reshoots which were done. Whedon coming in and basically reshooting quite substantial material. Lightening the tone, of course, putting a lot of jokes in. But the sense was that on final viewing, it didn't gel, and that a lot of the concerns were around, explanations for character motivations, a kind of really vague explanation around plot moves. And again, we shouldn't, I think, criticize Whedon too heavily on that. I think he was stuck, like any director would be, with a tough moment in terms of a existing director having already completed the substantial film, and him being given a very strict rationale from Warner Brothers to say, bring this film down from the 3+ hours it was to something they can release in theaters. So I think he had a really tough call. But nevertheless, the sense was that the film just didn't work. In fact, I remember one of the things that has come out in the discussion around this Zack Snyder cut is Zack Snyder himself never having watched it. So Zack Snyder never watched the theatrical release by Joss Whedon, and in fact, he was told not to watch it by his wife and Chris Nolan, right? Christopher Nolan told, allegedly the story goes, Zack Snyder never ever to watch this film. So what's interesting now is we have finally the Zack Snyder cut, and there's another whole drama around that, which we'll touch on, I think, after I go through the plot. But basically, yeah, what we have here is Zack Snyder's completed vision of what he wanted this film to be, this Justice League film to be, and what it's offering us, I think, is a very clear and transparent case of what Snyder's version is and what the studio's version is. Right, so I don't even think I'll refer to it as Joss Whedon's film. It's like we have the studio cut and the Snyder cut, and we can see that difference. And you can just do a YouTube search to see the differences because, allegedly Snyder, well, not allegedly, I think he's tweeted about it and said he'd not used any footage at all that Whedon shot. So none of the footage in the Snyder cut is from that Whedon cut or the studio release. That this is all his content. And part of what's interesting about that is it's a fascinating way to get a really interesting look at the studio version versus the the Snyder cut, and make some judgments, right? Does it work? Is it better? Was it worth all the enormous amount of money and time and effort that was sunk into this? So we'll go over all of that, and I guess the background for also this is currently available to watch. Trent, how can people watch it if they'd like to?
So, if you are in Australia, the best way to watch this is through Binge, which is one of the many streaming services that have been popping up over the past few years. If you don't want to spend money, and I can totally understand that, they do offer a free 14-day trial. So you can sign up, you can watch Justice League, you can watch both versions actually, they're up on there, as well as the rest of the DCEU. You can watch anything else you want. As long as you unsubscribe before the 14 days are up, then you can do it for free. Or you can do what I did, forget to unsubscribe and sign up for a month and pay for it. But so be it. And if you're in America, it's on HBO Max, which all of the Warner Brothers media is on at the moment. And if you're anywhere else, good question.
Probably on some streaming somewhere. And did this one get released here in cinemas? It hasn't at all, has it? Yeah.
No. I was at the time. I was actually hoping it would be because I thought, I like to watch these kind of movies in cinemas because it's kind of where it's meant to be watched. Movies are made with the cinema in mind. But no cinemas took this on in Australia, at least as far as I know. So the only way to watch it was streaming service. And having sat through it straight for 4 hours, actually, I'm kind of happy I was.
I definitely do want to get into that in the broader discussion. The fact that this, while on the surface it appears to be a kind of big Hollywood theater experience, it can't be, because of the logic behind the industry of particularly cinema industry. Anyway, so I do want to touch on that. All right, well, let's go into the plot a little. So basically, again, spoiler warning. Yes, so this will be a kind of quick summary of the entire plot, and it's I guess the simple way of boiling it down is that you have a big bad an invasion of a big bad villain, and heroes have to unite to save the world from this big bad villain. Right. So just in case my plot description goes down some rabbit hole and it appears like, well, what is this film again? That's the basic story. So it's a very conventional superhero story in that regard. But the thing about the plot review I find a little intimidating is just the number of characters that are in this. It's a huge ensemble cast. I mean, the theatrical release was large enough, but the problem with the Snyder Cut is that it puts even more characters into that. And you can definitely see that, you know, some of the hesitations around the Justice League film was this, and it hasn't changed, right? That is that this is a kind of unwieldy thing to do. And the reason that this is 4 hours and 2 minutes is because Zack Snyder really has jammed so much characters in there that you know, it is setting up many other films. So I know that Zack Snyder himself has said that this was there are at least 3 films I think that were going to follow this in Justice League. God knows what character spin-offs he was envisaging within that. I mean, you have, again, spoiler, Martian Manhunter at the end. So the idea being that there are additional, and what is it, the Atom character? I didn't even.
Yeah, he gets a little bit of a cameo kind of reference. It's not as obvious as Martian Manhunter.
Yeah, and I missed that myself
yeah.
until I looked a bit deeper and read other people's reviews. So tons and tons of characters, tons of Easter eggs, right? So he's really world building here. But the problem is offering a plot description of that, you know, can become incredibly unwieldy if you're going to name every character. So I don't know if I am or not, but basically, so what we have here is the film starts with the epic scope, with the idea of you have the big bad character is Darkseid, who had, you know, eons ago during the Age of Heroes on Earth come to Earth to try and conquer it, right? And he'd come with these things called the parademons, who are his kind of insect army mutated people, and to conquer the Earth, what he wanted to do in this kind of epilogue, or kind of, well, not epilogue, sorry, in this sequence that Snyder's setting up early, is the idea that so Darkseid wants to come. He came to Earth and he wanted to kind of kind of planet transform Earth, right? Terraform it through these mother boxes, right? So there are these 3 mother boxes, which you see in this sequence, where they will combine to basically terraform the Earth into Darkseid's planet, right? And these mother boxes aren't necessarily evil devices. They're hyper intelligent kind of computer type things. Like, I think there's a line in the movie saying, you know, they were so sophisticatedly kind of sci-fi in nature that they appeared to be magic to most people. And there's some great visuals there as this battle occurs from Earth's heroes. So you've got the old gods, right? So you have Ares, the god of war. You've got, you know, Greek heroes. Then you've got the Amazons. You've got the Atlanteans before they went into the water. You got a Green Lantern, and then you've got the humans, right? This kind of all your favorites, medieval or kind of ancient warriors. You got the Mongols and some Celts and some Vikings, right? So you've got these Earth humans, and they all fight against Darkseid and Steppenwolf, who Steppenwolf is the other kind of like second in charge, I guess, character in that battle.
He's second in charge, but he's kind of the focal
That's
point
right. So he
villain of
becomes,
this story.
After this battle, the key kind of villain. But that gets set up, and Darkseid in this sequence gets defeated. But what it triggers is the idea that later on, Steppenwolf, you know, this villain character, returns to Earth to kind of seek favor again from Darkseid. There's some kind of connection here between Darkseid and Steppenwolf, that Steppenwolf fell out of favor. And anyway, Steppenwolf's there, and he relocates, or he's trying to find these mother boxes, right? And that is the kind of trigger for Batman realizing a team needs to be put together, right? So in the previous film, there'd been this kind of sense of Earth is going to face huge intergalactic conquest, and it's beyond any one hero to do anything with. So that's this kind of trigger for Batman to realize that, okay, Steppenwolf, these boxes are unleashing some type of kind of invasion onto Earth. So the film rotates around Batman trying to put together a team to challenge this evil. And again, at this point, the heroes aren't quite sure what this evil is. So the film then kind of spends quite a bit of time setting up this team building, right? With Batman going to see Aquaman and getting rejected first. Then Wonder Woman comes on board, and they recruit Barry Allen, the Flash. They try to recruit Cyborg, who does get recruited towards the midpoint. Who else is there? Batman. Oh, right, of course, right. So they set up that as the initial team, but then they realize that it's probably not going to be strong enough to defeat the Mother Box, and they need Superman, who had died in the previous movie. So then they decide they need to bring Superman back through the power of this Mother Box, which had also helped transform Cyborg into who he is. So in this kind of, and here we're in this kind of after the second act, right? That must be the third act, I think, at this point. The like kind of reanimation, the return from the dead of Superman, which they achieve in doing. They bring Superman back through this Mother Box, but it's not normal Superman. He forgets who he is at the beginning, and he fights the heroes, right? He fights against Batman and Aquaman, Flash, and Wonder Woman in quite a good scene. I found that very effective. It's in both cuts. So there's that battle that then Lois Lane appears. Of course, Lois Lane in the previous movie had been set up as or two movies had been set up as the love interest as per canon, and had been proposed to by Superman. So anyway, very strong love bond. Lois Lane helps Superman remember who he is. So it sets up this final act. So you've got all your heroes together. They've been able to find out where what Steppenwolf's doing. There's some sacrifices there along the way as the heroes then move towards a plan to take down Steppenwolf and the Mother Boxes before they can all combine and basically bring in Darkseid again, right? So the idea is that this is going to set up the end of world unless they can stop the Mother Boxes combining. So they come up with this plan where everyone has motivations, right? Everyone has something to do to solve it. And they all come together. Superman appears finally to join the team. And the plan nearly goes according to plan the first time. But then you realize that the Flash, one of the key things with the Flash is this ability to turn back time, which is required because I found this quite good in terms of you get to see the heroes failing on their first attempt, right, to do this. And then the Flash being able to reverse time to be able to finally destroy the three boxes with the Cyborg's help, goes inside there. Great, done. The film's not finished. I think we're at the 3-minute 50 mark now. And then we have a hero scene where they defeat the three boxes, then they kill Steppenwolf, and Darkseid's kind of there in the portal and seeing them. And the thing about Darkseid is he wants to get back to Earth because of this thing called the intelligence. That's it. The anti-life equation. right? And there's, oh God, the anti-life equation, right? Trying to figure out what that is and how that works and how Darkseid forgot that the anti-life equation's on Earth. Because the key thing is that Earth was the only country that, or only world which defeated Darkseid, right? That's the only world which done it. How he'd forgotten that the anti-life equation was on Earth has been interesting. And I actually just read before I came on to do this that Zack Snyder has now tweeted why it was that Darkseid forgot over millenniums that the anti-life equation's there. It's because he was defeated in near death. And then eons went by, and he lost his entire kind of army, but then rebuilt it. So much time went by that, yeah, he'd forgotten. But then he found out that through Steppenwolf, the anti-life equation's there. Now, what's key about the anti-life equation? See, this just keeps getting bigger and bigger, doesn't it? Anyway, what's key about the anti-life equation in its simplest form is that it will, if triggered, allow Darkseid to slave the population to him, right? So that and this is how he creates his parademons, through this anti-life equation, where basically it turns them all into kind of mindless zombies that he controls. And throughout the film, there are all these kind of warnings for this dark future which might approach, where Superman basically becomes slaved to Darkseid through the anti-life equation. And this is what we see in this epilogue scene. So, like, you think the superheroes have won, and like, wow, they defeated Steppenwolf, they've blocked the barrier, it doesn't look like Darkseid can come. But then we have this fade to black epilogue moment, and there are, 3 epilogues that play out then? We have the first one, which is Lex Luthor escaping from Arkham Asylum and teaming up with Deathstroke, right, to take down Batman through Lex Luthor telling Deathstroke that Bruce Wayne is the secret identity, right? And you go, okay, that's interesting. Then they have Epilogue 2, which is the dark future, where, like, it's this post-apocalyptic, I've heard it described as Mad Max Batman, right? Who has cobbled together a small team because Superman's gone rogue because Lois Lane appears to have died, and so has Wonder Woman, and so has Aquaman, and so we're in this dark world where Darkseid seems to have won, and Superman's gone rogue in terms of being under the power now of Darkseid, and on Batman's team is the Joker and Deathstroke and the Atlantis woman, Mira. Okay, and that plays out for quite a while, and there's a lot of dialogue in that, which has got a lot of, kind of like fan interest in terms of, Leno improvising, kind of Joker lines, and Batman, drops an F-bomb, and stuff's gone down. Anyway, so that all plays out. Then you have the third epilogue after that, where Batman wakes up and it was a dream that Batman just had, and then the introduction of Martian Manhunter, who appears, right? So Martian Manhunter, again, is an interesting character from the DC universe, who's kind of up there with Superman in terms of powers, but his weakness is fire, right? But he's a very powerful superhero, literally a Martian. And the Manhunter thing, it's not that he hunts men, it's that when he came to Earth first, he kind of absorbed Earth culture through television and particularly detective shows. So, it's easier to think of him as Martian detective than Martian Manhunter. It's not that he hunts men and is some predator creature. And it's always confused me about his name. But anyway, Martian Manhunter gets introduced and he says, look, hey, I didn't help out at all in the fight, but, it's coming now, so I'm here to help for this next battle that's coming with Darkseid. And then credits, finally. Right? So, God, it just goes forever. Right, for a basic superhero movie, which this is, in terms of big bad comes to Earth to fight, destroy the world, and superheroes have to unite. it is so much that is stuck in there, and I haven't even kind of really scraped the surface on some of the particular plot points. But did I miss anything big?
I mean, you've covered the basics. Yeah, there's a lot of other sort of side plots that happen. Really, the main thing you would say is the driving plot that goes through a lot of this is the Cyborg character. His story arc, dealing with his parents, and then finding himself. Really, that takes up a lot of this movie, especially in the middle period. Which, if you are coming from the studio version, the 2017 release, you don't get that at all, and that adds a lot of time onto the middle part of the movie. So it doesn't cover the core plot, but it is such an integral part to this movie that it does kind of need to be mentioned. But yeah, you covered the basis of a 4 hour
Look,
movie
and
there. Yes.
it's I've seen some people review this film by having one of the reviewers, go back and watch the theatrical cut, to
Mm,
provide a plot synopsis of the theatrical cut again, and then the other reviewer plays a plot synopsis of the Zack Snyder one, and they go back and forth in terms of what's cut and why. And I mean, I guess one of the things that's interesting about that is that comparison between the
mm,
theatrical cut released by the studios, which came in at under 2 hours, from what I remember.
mhm,
Still kind of long, but then the Zack Snyder cut, which comes in at just over 4 hours. So where people I've read have come down on that is that the Zack Snyder, as you're saying yourself, Trent, really sets up better motivations for some key characters, because you see so much more
mm,
background in terms of what their motivations are, why they're behaving this way. So you have a better background for Aquaman. From
mhm,
the theatrical release, they kind of edited out William Defoe's kind of setup for the Aquaman movie, and the sense that he has to become the king of Atlantis again. All that got cut, but that's back
mm,
in the Zack Snyder clip, so you see a little bit more of his kind of hesitation to join the team, and the explanation why, and then the motivation to go and fight Steppenwolf. Cyborg is the key one, and Cyborg's really interesting in terms
mm,
of, one of the big complaints the actor had towards Joss Whedon seemed to be, how his character was treated in particular, and how his role became diminished in the Joss Whedon version. And many people have seen the Cyborg character as really rescued in the Zack Snyder version. As you're saying, a much better plot explanation. He becomes pivotal to the film. He becomes a real central character again. Flash also changes from being much more of a comedic character in the Joss Whedon one, with weird dialogue around brunch. At one point, like this whole thing about brunch, all that gets dropped. He's still got some amusing lines, but he does now appear in what's many people saying one of the really great scenes in the film, which is that slow mo rescue of the woman in the car crash. Again, doesn't really add much to the plot, but does, establish his heroic identity in a way that the Joss Whedon version didn't much earlier.
mm.
Um, yeah, and then of course the whole mother box scenes. I mean, a lot of it is extended, but yeah, many people see it working much better in terms of character explanations, sticking closer to the characters that were established in the other films. And was that your take in terms of the theatrical versus Snyder cut?
Yeah, absolutely. Like the biggest issue I had with the theatrical cut was that it was so clear that they had all of these characters, all of these new characters, because you're really heading into this movie, you only had Batman, you had Superman, and you'd had a brief, window into Wonder Woman, but you didn't have a lot there really. And so this movie was bringing in quite a few core characters. You basically had half the team having to be fully introduced for the first time, and the movie doesn't do a great job of introducing any of them as far as establishing who they are, what their character motivations are. And to do that in a 2 hour movie, it was clear they weren't able to, so they just didn't bother. But here with 4 hours, they actually are able to take the time to develop these characters, to give you enough there to actually want to support them, want to see them do well. Cyborg by far, he goes from a pretty much a nothing side character in the theatrical version to being like far and away the most compelling and interesting character in this movie. Aquaman has a lot more to sort of build himself around, especially the dynamics between him, Batman, and the rest of the team. And then even the Flash, like as you said, he's not as comedic in this one, but I think by taking away the more comedic aspects of his character, it kind of highlights how he's a social outsider from kind of the rest of the world, and how this the league that he joins actually gives him a family, gives him a home, gives him friends that he was struggling to find in
Yeah,
the
look, I
real
made a
world.
note of that myself when I was watching it, in terms of one of the themes which comes out a lot stronger here is motivations based around, their family circumstances, right? So there's a lot of
Mm,
kind of parental absence that's driving character motivations, and we see that much more clearly in the Cyborg character and the relationship with the father, really underpinning the narrative arc that character's on, and his fruition really being about reconciling with his father, who had been absent, for many of his life, reconciling, and then also being able to, uh, you know, um, fix the, defeat the mother cube through that reconcilement, right? Through not
mm,
going to the wish fulfillment that the mother cube's offering him, and so forth. So yeah, the absent father there, and Stephen Wolf himself, right? His character gets much better developed in this, again, around this kind of
absolutely.
parental issue. I mean, Darkseid's not his dad, but you can definitely see this kind of, stepfather vibe coming there, that he wants to win Darkseid's favor again, that he'd fallen out of favor. And that gets established a lot more clearer and is a lot easier to see. Aquaman and the loss of his mother. Again, there's dialogue there around
Hmm.
that. And Flash, yeah, you do see the relationship with the father in the jail much better, in terms of, then you have that dialogue when he's trying to turn back time, which is all about him
Hmm.
living up to his father's wishes, I guess, in a way.
Yeah.
So yeah, the theme comes out a little bit stronger. I mean, it's still a superhero movie, right? I mean, I think this is one of the interesting things about this question of what do we got here, because so much money has been sunk into this. I mean, we're talking in the tens of
Mm,
millions, if not hundreds of millions, to to, to do both versions, certainly, but just the Zack Snyder one. A lot of reason why people were saying the Zack Snyder thing won't ever happen is because of the money involved. Snyder can say there's a cut, but it's a cut before final rendering. It's a cut before some of the exposition scenes are shot, all the additional scenes which still need to be shot. It's not theatrically releasable. So people were saying it won't happen because of that, but it did, right? And it's really interesting, I guess, to ask ourselves why the studio would back it, right? Why HBO Max and Warner Brothers would finally get behind this, because it seems as if Zack Snyder had a falling out with Warner Brothers, and the reasons why he came off the film were unclear, right? It seemed to be mutual, but it's clear, as again setting up the universe, that Warner Brothers weren't happy with the direction he was taking it in, and we can very much see the theatrical release being a studio release that expresses that the studio just wasn't happy with Zack Snyder's vision, and what they wanted instead was more humor, and what we got. And what's interesting about this, I think, for me, is that here we have the Snyder release and a judgment being made about Warner Brothers looking bad, because they ended up giving the version which was bad, right? I mean, what I've seen with a lot of the reviews is that the theatrical release is bad, right? And this is
mm,
better, right? It's not millions of dollars more better, right? In terms of, a lot of people say, it's not worth it. So many other small films could have been made instead of this. But nevertheless, it is an improvement on the theatrical release, and that leaves
mm,
us with judgments, right? That Warner Brothers comes off badly, in terms of, here we have a clear case of studio interference leading to a bad film, and usually studios won't allow a director to do a director's cut which directly challenges and proves their version is crap. Yet this happened. And this happened at great expense. So why would this have happened?
Well, I think the most obvious one, and maybe the one that presents the studio in a better light, is that with the advent of the HBO streaming service, they needed something that would really highlight you need to get this. Because the Warner Brothers media property, there's some good stuff there, but it doesn't have the sheer strength of pull, especially with nostalgia that say Disney Plus have. So if they're going to draw in all these people to watch HBO Max to pay the $10, $15 a month, however much it is in America, they needed something to be like, this is the reason you need to sign on. And by offering the Justice League in a Snyder Cut, where it's like for years, ever since Justice League got released, there was a Twitter campaign to bring on the Snyder Cut, release the Snyder Cut. By saying, we're going to do this, we're going to release this, it built hype around HBO Max, which had a little bit of attention but wasn't drawing big numbers upon its early release. And now people had a reason to care. People had a reason to want to watch. And even if you aren't a massive DC guy, I think the sheer curiosity of what is the Snyder Cut, this mythical Snyder Cut that we've been hearing about for years, what is this? And so it gave people a reason to pay attention and to sign on.
Yeah,
to
I agree.
HBO Max.
I agree, and I think you're right. There are those two reasons, and then a third. I think the first reason you point out that we're in a COVID space, and if you're a studio that's suddenly looking at theatrical releases disappearing from like February last year or March, and you're thinking, how do we make money? Oh, we're sitting on this 4-hour film that we can release and it won't go into cinemas, so why don't we just take advantage of it and release it on our digital HBO? That makes perfect sense, right? And it would be silly for them financially not to have made... well, I mean, again, they're sitting on this thing, which is the second reason why it happened, because you had this rabid fan base of Snyder fans who had been championing this case to release the Snyder Cut for many years. So much so, I think Warner Brothers was exhausted by it, fatigued by it, and struggling for a way to turn this PR machine around, because they were just, I think, even with the Godzilla film we talked about last week, it's still carrying on, right? The review bombing of the Godzilla film by the Snyder fans saying, make more Snyder films, shows how feverish this community was and how Warner Brothers, I think, could do two things at once, right? They could silence this fan base and say, okay, there it is. And they could hopefully get attention for HBO Max, get a lot of people subscribing because of the media interest. And this is something Zack Snyder pitched to them, from what I remember, when he got approval for this, saying, all of the social media around Warner Brothers films is coming from the Zack Snyder Cut. Right? If you look at all the other Warner Brothers films being released or have been released recently, they are dwarfed by the amount of media attention the Zack Snyder Cut or the calls for the Zack Snyder Cut is getting. Right? So two things there. The other reason I think it works is and this is something I was listening to the Folding Ideas YouTube channel, and way back last year he ran a video talking about the Snyder Cut doesn't exist, but does exist. And he said one of the reasons why it won't be made is that for cinemas, it doesn't work in their market, right? Because no cinema is financially viable showing a 4-hour film. That is, they want to have 3 or 4 films on rotation in a cinema, going around so they can get people in, they can sell food more. If they've got one big 4-hour plus film, they'll be lucky to screen that twice in a day, maybe 3 times if they want to pay overtime for their employees, right? They'll come out in the negative, right? Cinemas don't want to release long films, right? And there was a lot of pushback against that 3-hour Avengers Endgame film because of this. So even something as bankable as Avengers, cinemas saw, minimal help with. So cinemas don't want it. But here we are in a space where cinemas in the COVID environment are just not part of the equation. So I think that was, that reason why it went streaming. Streaming's big, it's viable, it's working in this economy, and it could justify the millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars spent on bringing back Affleck and Henry Cavill and was it Gale, the Wonder Woman, like the whole like
Gal Gadot, yeah.
a level celebrity cast, all of the
Mm.
tech people to do the shoots again, that they can bring them all back and do this right for a incremental improvement, really.
I do think it's worth mentioning too, because you talk about how much it costs to make this movie, both the theatrical and the Snyder cut. But it's kind of interesting if you look at it from the perspective of, yes, it was going to cost them. The figure I heard was an extra $20 million to basically take what they had and turn it into the Snyder cut. If you look at that from the perspective of it's going to cost you $20 million to make a AAA
Again,
blockbuster movie, that's a
twice.
pretty good return of investment. Oh, but because I mean, you've already spent the $200 odd million. That's already done and dusted. They've spent that. They've made their movie. But then to, in many ways, make a new movie, and in a lot of ways, this Snyder Cut is a new movie. It's presented as such in a lot of way, in some sort of aspect of it. You don't watch this and compare it to the theatrical cut in the sense of, oh well, it's the same movie, just tweaked a little bit. It is very different. To make this movie a very different movie, sell it as such for $20 million, and get the marketing, get the attention, get the focus, and all the streaming money that comes from that. That's actually not a
Maybe I
bad
think the
investment.
verdict is out still in terms of whether this is
Mm.
going to really make an impact, like The Mandalorian for Disney. Is it going to
Mm.
really trigger something? And it's interesting. There's an article I just read today from where is this website? It is GameSpot, and their headline is "Less than half of Snyder Cut Justice League viewers actually finished watching it." So, data from the US and
Wow.
UK that has just come in from HBO Max is that in the US, only 36% of people that have watched it have finished it to the end. In the UK, it's 48% have finished it. So, I'm not sure. I am not sure. I mean, it's definitely triggering a lot of interest, and it
Mm.
might at the end of the day have a broad return. What's interesting is there's I was a podcast called Now Playing I was listening to, and they were running through the history of this film. And one of the things they pointed to was a Warner Brothers exec or someone doing a press release saying, this film is a cul-de-sac. It's taking a journey in a cul-de-sac. That is, you'll drive down this one-way road and you'll turn around at the end and go back, because this film is not setting up an expanded universe for them, right? That this is a one-off to complete Snyder's kind of aspirations. And again, the evidence for this is yes, on one hand you've got a Warner Brothers person saying, this is a one and done. Clearly this film is set up to build the world, right? But if you look at how they do
Mm.
that in the epilogue, the kind of 3 epilogues, it's basically Snyder putting all his cards on the table, saying this is my last chance, and he's
Mm.
even gone on record now disclosing the films he was planning to make, right? The narrative and everything. That
Mm.
the next one was going to set up a love triangle, right? One of the things I was reading was that there was a love triangle he wanted to put in between Superman, Batman, and Lois Lane. That is Lois Lane falling in love with Batman, and even a suggestion like this. I didn't see it, but there's meant to be a pregnancy kit in one of the scenes, and the suggestion being is that's from an earlier script where Zack Snyder had pitched, after Batman's death, a love affair developing between Bruce Wayne and Lois Lane. And he was setting that up for the second movie to, again, ramp up this tension between Batman and Superman. And that the dialogue throughout the film has been this kind of like Lois Lane's the key, and we had this scene in Batman v Superman where Flash goes from the future, and Snyder said that his plan for the second film was indeed Lois Lane dies, triggers Darkseid's return, which is the second Justice League movie climax, and then in the third film you have this kind of Mad Max world that gets played out, and Flash has to go back in time to a more appropriate moment to tell Bruce Wayne to make sure he saves Lois Lane. And what happens is, because there's that dialogue where the Joker character in the epilogue. And this is a really interesting thing I was listening to. So one of these movie reviewers has said, okay, so there's a dialogue where Joker says, how many multiverses are there where you haven't had the Goombas to die? Right. And it's because in Zack Snyder's disclosure of the plot for the third film, the reason why Superman went rogue and became Darkseid's second in command is because he didn't save Lois Lane. That he was meant to protect Lois Lane while Superman took out Darkseid. He failed, and the suggestion is because of the love triangle. And then Flash goes back in time to make sure Bruce Wayne understands he has to sacrifice himself at that point. And the third film ends, or not ends, the third film ends with Batman dying to save Lois Lane, rescuing the Earth in that dystopic future. Superman, Lois Lane have a baby. They call Bruce Kent, baby Bruce, right? They name it Bruce. And then they take Bruce Wayne to the Batcave to say, this is your mantle. This is what, the next step forward. So again, interesting vision, right? Good to read. I don't know if I'd like to watch them. I would be interested. But anyway, because he's disclosed that and he's put it all out there, there's the movies. I don't imagine this is going to set up a DCEU for Zack Snyder. And the sense is this is just a cul-de-sac. This is just this weird anomaly.
It would be very difficult to release what is essentially a streaming-only movie to then set up a theatrical cinematic universe, because you would have to essentially restart the cinematic universe, because they've gone on, they've cast a new Batman. They're going on to do a whole separate thing with that. The characters that were still from the Justice League are still there, but they're kind of, you'd be able to pivot them back. But it was clear that Patty Jenkins with Wonder Woman 2 was not really developing it with the perspective of, well, we're still in the Zack Snyder version of, well, I guess at that time she was still building it around the studio, the Joss Whedon version of Justice League, but it wasn't meant to really connect in the same way that you would expect these grand cinematic universes to tie together. And I mean, obviously the current hashtag is to restore the Snyderverse, but I do think, like, making a $20 million addition to make this revised version is one thing, but then to build, $200 million movies that continue on from that, while you've already got this sort of weird, they would essentially have to do a multiverse running concurrently with the other movies, which I don't think DC have anywhere near the audience trust to pull that off.
No, it's a great point, though. I mean, I do think that DC actually have done a multiverse that the audience is more comfortable than Marvel. That is, if you have a look at the Joker character, people are comfortable with the different versions of the Joker that we've had. Even the, so obviously we've got Heath Ledger's Joker, but the Leno, and then the Joker film that came out, Joaquin Phoenix, those all exist comfortably in this space, and the sense that multiverse is fine. I mean, in a way that I don't think Marvel have done, right? I mean,
well, DC as a comic brand have always, I feel like they've always been more willing to delve into multiverse, alternate world building. A lot of their greatest stories from the comic realm have come initially as, alternate universe stuff. Like Dark Knight Returns that you mentioned, Killing Joke was originally alternate universe, Superman Red Sun. They have built a big comic empire on these what if, why don't we do this differently, that become so popular that they do sometimes become canon. And I do think, comic audiences are more willing. I think in some ways, mainstream audiences are more willing to accept the different Jokers, because everyone just kind of wanted to forget about the Jared Leto Joker. And so they got Heath Ledger. That's really good. Oh, Jared Leto. Yeah, no, let's move on to the next one. Oh, Joaquin Phoenix. Cool. That's a good version. So I think that might have helped if Jared Leto was a better Joker, more well-received Joker. Maybe the alternate universe stuff on cinema would have been a bit more difficult.
But I think we agree, yeah. So the Snyder universe isn't going anywhere. That this is not.
I would be very shocked. The only way I see it continuing is through the legacy of the characters that were in the Justice League that are continuing: Aquaman, Wonder Woman, the Flash, which I know for a long time the rumor was going to be
Mm.
Flashpoint, which would essentially explain the different universes cinematically, which I still think is a smart way of doing it, and you can restore elements of the Snyder world through doing that.
And
Whether
I
they
think
do or not,
they
I'm not
took that up
sure.
in the TV show.
Um,
I've not watched the Flash TV show, but I think they went
mm.
more heavily into that.
Well, Ezra Miller appeared in the Flash TV show as
Yes,
the Snyder Flash. Yes. And there's talk about Michael
that's
Keaton being
right.
in the Flash movie, which suggests that they're even going to try and drag in the 1989 Batman universe. Which, I mean, bravo to them if they do pull that off, because that's a very bold and long-reaching
Look, I
mission
think it's
statement.
interesting. Into the Spider Verse coming out from Sony equally
Mm.
has attracted all that attention of multiple different Spider Men, as well as equal. I mean, the Spider Man universe seems to be the one that Marvel is more comfortable having a multiverse space. I mean, there was rumors of Tobey Maguire coming back, Sam Raimi directing Tobey Maguire again in Spider Man, equal to Batman in terms of the speculation of
Mm.
various actors coming back who've played Batman in some multiverse space for a Batman universe. Spider-Man equally being set up from that. Interestingly, that Spider-Man is one of those franchise properties which is held like a cross-platform, or at least Sony have it, but then they've played with Marvel to allow it to appear.
Yeah, it's that really awkward who actually owns the rights and who has creative control of it. Which, I mean, for a while there, it was looking like Spider Man was going to be pulled away from the MCU after it had been introduced, and then they've basically come back on board. So I guess in a lot of ways, it'd actually be quite bold of them to continue to develop that, because you don't know how much they're actually going to lose if they have another falling out. I
And
guess
I
money
think,
does
yeah,
speak,
I
though.
mean, wrapping up, I think that's a good place to end in terms of some of the things about these superhero films which are interesting are maybe less the plots, which are conventional, and more what they reveal about, narrative storytelling. Well, not really narrative storytelling, the kind of proprietary industry Hollywood space, the kind of
Mm.
economy which is driving this, the fandom which is around it, and their power struggles with that economy. It's a really fascinating space to play out, and the Zack Snyder one being an exemplar case of that. So I guess in conclusion, would you recommend this film to watch for people?
Yes, but I do think you need to have a strategy before going in to watch it, because it is a 4 hour movie. It is designed like there are chapters, which you did kind of mention. There are chapters there, so you don't have to watch it as one long 4 hour movie. But I think you need to decide going in: am I going to take breaks in between these chapters, or am I just sitting down with a lot of popcorn, and am I just diving into it head first for one long viewing? Because if you don't go in with a plan, I think about the 2 hour mark, 2.5 hour mark, you're going to be wondering,
And
what
some
what am
people
I
have
doing here?
suggested that the film, I mean, and Zack Snyder himself has said that one of his visions was to release two films for this movie,
Mm.
for the Justice League one. And people have pointed out, there is a good break point after the Steppenwolf battle with the Amazons, to take a break, right? That you can almost snip the film there and say, okay, that's part one done, and then come back and watch the second part later. And as the review kind of mentioned, was the Snyder has put these cue cards in throughout it. I think there's 6 parts to the film, and a lot of people
Yep.
who've reviewed it have said they've used those part markers as the breakpoints. Uh, some critics have
Mm,
said, look, you
mm.
can't really, it's not really episodic in terms of some of those episodes, some of those parts just don't have anything to them to be satisfying, really, to say,
Yeah.
okay, that episode's done. And in reality, you do end up binging it like a 4 hour thing. I don't know how you watched it. Did you watch it all at once, or?
I dove in and watched the whole thing. Admittedly, at the time, I didn't know for sure if there were chapter breaks or not. But I just kind of thought, well, I have 5 hours until I have to do stuff. So allowing for toilet breaks and snack breaks. I thought I should have time to make it through this. But yeah, I do absolutely agree that the chapter breaks are a little bit arbitrary in the sense that you're not going to get a nice self-contained little story arc that's where you would finish and go, I'm happy I watched that 30 minutes. You'd probably be a bit disappointed with some of them in that respect.
Well, look, I'd also agree that it's worth watching. It's a incremental improvement over the theatrical cut. I think this will be the version people refer to. I could still have enjoyed it with an hour cut from it, and there are various scenes that I think aren't doing anything.
Yeah, there's a lot there. Like a lot of the Amazonian stuff at the start, I think could have been cut and they wouldn't have lost much. And the epilogue itself is 30 minutes. So if you don't watch the epilogue at the same time, and if you cut a bunch of the Amazonian stuff, you could get it to about 3 hours, 15 minutes. And then it's still long. But there are other movies that go that long. Yeah, it's just a typical long movie like The Irishman rather than an almost record-breaking
Although
long
that being said,
movie.
it did clip along. I mean, I didn't find myself in most of the spots feeling it was dragging, right? The 4 hours in total, I think, did go along quite well. The epilogue really felt draining, and I think the final battle is draining to watch, but satisfying.
That's interesting. I actually found that final battle was markedly better than the
Yeah, look, I
theatrical
mean, it was
cut.
fine. And I think at that point, maybe a sense of fatigue getting on. I mean, it was still fine. I had no major problems with it. I mean, the epilogue, yeah, I thought could count. The Martian Manhunter character didn't go anywhere. I think his character adds confusion, like the almost nonsensical first appearance he has, where you find out that Martha is the Martian Man. I mean, just why? So, but a lot of other reviewers have pointed that out as kind of a misstep, which undercuts a very well shot scene compared to the Whedon version. Between Lois Lane and Martha Kent. Anyway, we could go on forever, but I think wrapping it up, it's a fascinating experience to go through. I think it's to understand the logic behind this film and how it came to appear is something to look into to understand this point in time. It is a movie of this moment of history and time in Hollywood. And I think, yeah, as you dig down into it, it does reveal a lot about how Hollywood works and superhero films work and the nature of entertainment at this moment in time. So, it gives you bragging rights, I think, to go into and have some ideas about. So we'll wrap up there. Thanks again, Trent, for coming along.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
That's Media Tackle for this week. I've been Craig Norris, your host. Keep listening for great and interesting stuff in future episodes. Bye.
See ya.